what we're seeing and what 15 years is showing is that generally speaking, most people don't have enough education and coaching around investments and money. So that's one thing that's kind of at the forefront of the conversation is just finding ways to level up and really being intentional about your savings. Because one thing you said, Andrew, that I love is, you look at your a family's burn rate, like how much they're spending, and life gets more expensive as you go, especially if you have kids. Like just analyzing Christmas alone, like what your kids ask as teenagers is very different than when they were 5 or 6 years old, and kids just get more expensive with time until they're out of the house.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Big Hitters Podcast. I'm joined by Joe Griffin, who is the CEO of TenCap, and he has been in the financial planning space for a long time and has seen a lot of great things. He has a lot of commentary on people that have invested wisely, used their wealth wisely, their time wisely. And so I'm excited to dive in with him. Joe, thanks so much for joining us here today.
Yeah, grateful to be with you.
Well, Joe, my first question is always the same. Who are you? How'd you get here? Tell us a bit of a story, how you wound up to this point in the industry and where you're at today.
Yeah, I'll be short with this one just because I don't feel like this is ultra interesting. But yeah, I've been in the financial planning industry for a little over 15 years now. I've managed two different RAAs. The first one I managed, we got up to about 960 million under management before I left and started at TenCap. And that firm was generating about 5 million a year. TenCap's a smaller group, and I'm kind of taking the same fundamentals of growth that I initiated and started with True North. And we have about a 250,000 under management. And
Billion, right?
sorry, yeah, so we have about 250 million under management. And yeah, we're excited about where we're at in our growth trajectory, and we're having a good time growing the business.
That's awesome. Well, I know that when we last talked, you kind of commented that your guys' run rate was really impressive. I'm kind of curious to hear like how you got to where you are and what you're kind of doing to grow your the assets that you have under management.
Yeah, so I started within my first year in this business just realizing that the marketing that some of these groups were doing were ancient. They were not fresh and new, and so I jumped into that side of the business, and that's really where created a career for myself is inside of the complexity that's where I created a career for myself was just inside of the complexity and growth that came from growing the business. So at True North, the last group that I was with, we were doing close to 150 million of new assets under management for the last 2 years consecutively before I left. So for most RAAs, like that's powerhouse growth. And for TenCap, we're pulling some astonishing numbers that we're really proud of, and it's all inside of just some different levels of marketing that we're doing. And I'll just kind of keep it that way, just because some of that is a little bit of a secret sauce that I've created over my career, and some of that I'm happy to talk about, and some of that's a little more confidential.
He's keeping the secrets close, everybody. He's not going to share the whole 9 yards. Doesn't want any of his competitors to be listening to this, but that's smart. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, cool. Well, so I know when we talked before this call, you said you had some interesting commentary on people that are wealthy and that a different mindset they have about money. So I wanted to just spend some time on that. Like what in general strikes you? You kind of see the gamut, the spectrum. Like what strikes you about the people that do have money? What's their mindset? What makes them different?
Yeah, so I love talking about that. So for the past 15 years, all of the new clients between the two firms that I was with for those 15 years, every time a new client called, I am and was taking those calls, just introducing the firm and finding out about what chapter of life these people are in. And so it's been very educational for me, just kind of learning about everyone's trajectory and path. I mean, we don't talk about our failures very often, right? And so
Hmm.
people are calling me and just sharing like, hey, like this is my situation, here's how I got there. And like those are very powerful conversations for me to be a part of because I kind of get to see the the organizational drawer, the dirty drawer and under the bed, for a lot of people's lives and financially. And that's been very helpful and rewarding just to get clear on what it's like for a lot of Americans. So one thing that I just want to share, Andrew, I mean, just anecdotally, I think we all kind of know this, but most people just flat delay saving for retirement far longer than they ever should. And what I want to talk about is just like I want to share my experience for like, well, why do people do that? Why do we do that? But I just wanted to get your take on that. When you think about why don't we save for retirement like we should, what is your guess? What have you seen in your world?
Well, so I come at from so my perspective with my firm was college financial planning. And I know that for a lot of the parents that I helped, a lot of them felt like their kid had just been born yesterday and they were still trying to get caught up and were being run ragged to, different travel sports and things like that. And the day they thought would never come was there, right? And so I think you're absolutely right. Like one of the challenges is thinking about this ethereal thing that's maybe 20 or 30 years away when in reality, time is either your friend or your enemy, right? So you either leverage it and use it to your advantage, like you're saying, hey, there's this thing that's probably going to happen in 30 years. I'm probably going to want to stop working. Or there might be something, the other side of that coin is I might not be able to keep working. Like, well, what happens when that happens, right? Um, and at the moment, it just doesn't feel concrete. What feels concrete is like, I got to get my daughter to school every day, and I feel like I'm not even getting enough sleep and getting by to do that, let alone this thing that's probably 30, 40, 50 years away. But I'm really curious to hear your perspective on it as well. What makes people be forward thinking in that regard and what makes people feel like they can't get caught up?
Yeah. So a couple things that we've seen in this space is like think about all the training that you've had about money, like how to save for retirement. Like if you think about how much training you've taken on in that space, saving for retirement or learning more about money or investments. I mean, can you speak to that? Like how much time you've put into like some education and coaching?
Yeah, it's been a huge part. Obviously, with the between the continuing education, the industry events we go to, the webinars that we're blasted with every day. Like, yeah, there's a lot of ongoing education on these topics. But I think I see where you're going. Like, this is at the forefront of our minds, so we're probably of all people should be the ones doing it. But that might not be necessarily on the rest of America's minds,
Yeah.
perhaps.
Yeah, and that's what we've seen is just like even just talking to friends and family, let alone clients, is one of the gaps that people are dealing with is, you know, we've been touching money since we were kids and dealing with money, but when you look at like, how qualified or how much training have you actually taken around money or investments, for most people, it's pretty minimal. And for something that's ruling our day, like is so important every day you're interacting with money, it's a deficiency in our world that and in our culture that we just have to like address more of people who generally just all around need a little more training and coaching. Now, I think this is just my opinion, but I think it's never been easier to have access to like great information. And this podcast is an example of that, right? Like the amount of free education that someone can get is, right at our fingertips. I'm in a place of just kind of dealing with some of my physical goals and a lot of education that I've bumped into just in like social media has actually been really helpful in like understanding more about nutrition and exercise and things like that. So we live in this time where education's at our fingertips, maybe more than ever. But what we're seeing and what 15 years is showing is that generally speaking, most people don't have enough education and coaching around investments and money. So that's one thing that's kind of at the forefront of the conversation is just finding ways to level up and really being intentional about your savings. Because one thing you said, Andrew, that I love is, you look at your a family's burn rate, like how much they're spending, and life gets more expensive as you go, especially if you have kids. Like just analyzing Christmas alone, like what your kids ask as teenagers is very different than when they were 5 or 6 years old, and kids just get more expensive with time until they're out of the house. And so it can get hard, become hard and feel like you're on this treadmill that just keeps going faster while you're making more, cost of living goes up. And so here's what I want to leave your listeners with, Andrew. An assertion that I want to make is for most people, they really don't ever get to a place where all of a sudden it's just easy to save. What we've seen is it is always an intentional decision where people have to decide, am I going to save for retirement? And if you decide that cost of living and expenses are too much, I can't do it. That's how it's going to go for you. You're not likely to find the means and the path to saving for retirement because you've decided that you don't have enough money and you can't. And when you contrast that with someone who's decided, you know what? I don't have as much money as I want, and I'm going to save some for retirement and start developing a plan and being intentional with my money. I mean, it is astonishing. That's why we have so many millionaire teachers. That's just one example of, not historically a really high salary, and teachers become millionaires every day in America. So it is possible. And what I would like to suggest that listeners really take on is whatever you've decided is likely how it's going to go. If you've decided that you don't have enough to save, you're probably not going to save. And if you've made up your mind that, you know what, no matter what my income is, I'm going to find a way to put money away and save, those people are going to save, and they do. And it's amazing what they can accumulate over their lifetime.
Um, Time and energy freedom, Joe. So we talked just briefly before, but I started a business that became a very profitable prison for me, right? And I talked about the book I bought, Buy Back Your Time, which really kind of helped me have perspective. And so my two ventures, Freedom AI and Virtual Assist, were all about creating freedom for business owners. But with time and energy freedom, what does it mean for you? And either how have you found it, or maybe some of your wealthier clients, like how do they see time differently than maybe perhaps the rest of us?
Yeah, one of the most life-changing books, like educational books for us as a leadership here at TenCap, has been Who Not How by Dan Sullivan. And this is a remarkable book for everybody, but specifically for business owners, because it really can help you get clear on whatever your goals are. For most things, especially in a business, you really need the right who. And building a business with great who's around you just opens up your world to organization and clarity, and allows everybody to kind of be working on what they're, getting the right people on the right seats of the bus. And that's been pivotal. That's been pivotal for the TenCap business of trying to find the right who's for each role that we have.
Love that. And big Dan Sullivan fan. So thanks for shout out to Dan Sullivan.
Yeah.
Okay, last couple questions here. AI, how are you using it? And then is there anywhere that you feel like you could be using it, but you're not?
Yeah, there's several places that we're using it. One of them is like one of our VP just recently created a retirement calculator using AI, that will land on our website sometime this year. So we use it all the time for presentations, whether it's 401k education or things like that. I mean, the amount of coding, and possibilities that you could do with it is pretty remarkable. I will say this, I do think there's sometimes where I've found myself trying to cram AI into a place where maybe I'm trying to more force it. So I think AI is great, and there's lots of ways it can be used. And you can get to a place of trying to just cram AI in to cram AI in. So that's my opinion.
Where do you feel like you could be using it, but you're not?
One place that we could be using it that we're not is just with running some of our retirement analyses. We're just barely getting to a place working with Morningstar where we can upload an existing client statement and have them run a holdings report or an investment analysis. So we haven't used it there, and we're looking forward to that. That's one of the spaces in our business that we're looking forward to developing that out.
I love that. All right, Joe, this is the last question. Is there anything we haven't talked about today? A cause, a hot take, um, something that you like to get on a soapbox about? Is there anything that we haven't talked, or something you like to plug that we haven't talked about yet?
Yeah. In Ryan Halliday's book, The Psychology of Money, he makes a point to save like a pessimist and invest like an optimist. And that has given me a lot of thought, and I think that's a good thought. Whether we're talking about a business owner or just, the American family or individual, thinking about what areas of your life are you saving like a pessimist and investing like an optimist, or are you doing that in the reverse? And so just basically, how are you interacting with money and investments, whether you're a business owner or just an American trying to build out a financial future? I think that's a really healthy thought. And even for myself, I think about that quite often of, am I saving like an optimist and investing like an optimist, or any combination of that. But I really love Ryan's point of saving like an optimist and saving like a pessimist and investing like an optimist, because it really helps create a healthy paradigm to how to look at money and investments and not be overly optimistic, but also not overly pessimistic.
I love that. That's a great little nugget. Joe, if people wanted to find out more about who you are, what you do, and how to get in contact with you, where would they go?
Yeah, the best place is just to go to our website, tencap.com, and there you can kind of get a little more clarity on what we do as a business, what our services are, and how to get in touch with us if someone wants to start into a financial plan.
Love that. Thanks so much. And Joe Griffin, everybody. And just quick reminder, the notion of this concept, the Big Hitters podcast, is all about guys that are doing big business across different industries. And then just a quick plug for what we do, virtual assistant staffing, along with artificial intelligence implementation. Thanks, Joe, so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Andrew.